You know, in the world of the UFC, the stakes are just insanely high. Fortunes can be made and lost with a single punch, a single submission. But it's not just the fighters risking it all inside the cage. It's also the millions and millions of dollars being wagered on every single fight. And sometimes all that money brings up a really uncomfortable question.
So, yeah, let's just cut right to it. Was a UFC fight fixed? Because this one question is at the very heart of a huge controversy that's shaking the entire sport to its core.
And look, this isn't just some fan theory or locker room gossip. This is the real deal. It's so serious that multiple sources have now confirmed the FBI, yes, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is officially involved.
So how in the world did we get here? I mean, to understand why the FBI is getting involved with the UFC, we have to go back to the night of one very, very suspicious fight that set off alarm bells everywhere.
Okay, so this one fight, man, it was like the perfect storm of red flags. First, you've got the fighter, Isaac Delgarian. He was a heavy favorite to win. Then, just hours before the fight, a tidal wave of money comes in, all of it betting against him, which caused the odds to just plummet. And then, the shocker, Delgarian goes out there and loses in the very first round. The fallout was instant. Sportsbooks were so suspicious they actually gave people their money back, and the UFC just cut Delgarian from the roster completely.
So who was the first to spot this? It was a company called Integrity Compliance 360, or IC360 for short. Think of them as the watchdogs for pro sports betting. Their whole job is to stare at the betting markets and look for anything that seems shady or manipulated. And on this particular night, their systems were basically screaming.
And this right here, this is a crucial part, and UFC President Dana White has confirmed it himself. IC360 didn't just flag this after the fight was over. Nope, they told the UFC that something was seriously wrong with the betting lines before the fighters even made their walk to the octagon. Just think about that for a second. The UFC knew they might have a fixed fight on their hands before a single punch was thrown.
So the fight's over, the suspicious outcome is now a reality, and the UFC has to act. This next part of the story is all about their official and very public response to the whole mess.
And Dana White, well, he came out swinging, just like you'd expect. He pushed this zero-tolerance policy, saying publicly that the second the fight ended, his first call was to the FBI. The message was loud and clear. The UFC is the victim here, and they're going to do everything they can to punish whoever was involved.
And apparently this wasn't just for the cameras. To really hammer home how serious this was, White said he met with the FBI not just once, but twice the very next day. He even said his office was, and I quote, full of FBI agents.
But here's the thing. Is this really an isolated incident? A one-off case with a rogue fighter? Or, as we're about to see, is it just the latest chapter in a much more troubled history for the sport?
Yeah, as you can see from this timeline, betting scandals are, unfortunately, nothing new for the UFC. You go back to 2015, a fighter was actually sentenced to prison for a fixing scheme. Then you jump to 2022, and this huge investigation gets launched into a coach named James Krause for some really shady betting. And that brings us to now. The Delgarian case seems to have blown the doors wide open, and now the FBI is reportedly rolling that Krause investigation into this new, much larger one.
So when you put all these incidents together, it paints a pretty concerning picture. And it forces all of us to ask a really serious question about just how clean this sport actually is.
Now, while the official investigation is happening, a completely different and way more explosive story is spreading like wildfire online. And this, my friends, is where things get really complicated.
So what we have here are two completely contradictory stories. On one side, you've got the official line from Dana White, who's flat out denying this is a big problem, calling it all clickbait BS. But on the other side, you have these explosive, unconfirmed reports from online sources. They're claiming the FBI has flagged over 100 fights this year alone. And here's the most damaging claim. These sources allege the FBI warned the UFC hours in advance to cancel the Delgarian fight, and that the UFC let it happen anyway. That's a direct contradiction of the official story. So, with an active FBI investigation going on, and a war of information just raging online, what does all this mean for the future of the UFC, and really, for professional sports as a whole? A scandal like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There are some real underlying factors here. First, the absolute explosion of legalized sports betting has poured billions of dollars into the system, which creates a huge incentive for corruption. At the same time, people have argued for years that the pay for non-star fighters is just too low, making them really vulnerable. I mean, if you're only making, say, 20 grand for a fight, a $100,000 bribe starts to sound dangerously tempting. And because fighters are independent contractors, not employees, they can't really unionize to fight for better pay and protection. It leaves them as vulnerable athletes totally exposed.
And that's really what's at stake here. This isn't about one fighter or one fight anymore. It's about trust. It's about whether we, the fans and the bettors, can believe that what we're watching is a real, legitimate competition or just a show with a predetermined ending.
And that leaves us with one final, lingering question. In a world where the line between sports and gambling is getting blurrier every single day and with billions of dollars changing hands, who is really in control and who really stands to win?